The wind howled like a wounded animal across the dead plains of the Lacanine, a world once verdant and peaceful, now choked by ash and crumbled steel. Thunder cracked overhead, though no clouds stirred. It was not nature's fury, but the sky itself, glitching, folding in on remnants of a broken atmosphere. Amid this suffocating silence of a post-battle world, a rusted pod lay half-buried in a gouge of blackened earth. Flames licked its edges, a metal limb twitched from its cracked shell, and inside, something small, a creature, not of earth, not of anything human, shivered and whimpered in pain, its chitin glistening with thick purple fluid. Kara Reese wasn't supposed to be alive. Her squad had been vaporized hours ago during the orbital descent. Their shuttle had taken a plasma hit just before re-entry, throwing her clear as the cockpit split open like a cheap tin can. She had landed far, skidding across the surface in a fragment of the escape craft, body broken, helmet cracked. Only her stubborn pulse and sheer, infuriating will had pulled her out from under the wreckage. Humans weren't built to last here. The air was poisoned, the ground crusted with toxin. But she was still standing, boots crunching over shards of some fallen alien tower, as her Geiger counter ticked madly with every step. Her hands trembled around a half-melted rifle she no longer trusted. Then she heard it. That sound. A soft, wet keening. Not machine. Not wind. It was the kind of sound that bypassed thought and struck the ribs, a pleading, pitiful whimper, the kind that forced your eyes wide, even when every instinct said keep walking. Kara turned, past the bones of a twisted mech beast. Past it crumpled, flag unreadable now. And then she saw it dot at first. She couldn't tell if it was alive. A curled heap of translucent plates and twitching tendrils, shimmering faintly like oil on water. Alien, undeniably alien. Small like a child, but wrong. And shape. 4 limbs, yes, but uneven. No eyes where they should have been, but sockets leaking from ruptured seams. Its chest pulsed in shallow, broken rhythm. The pod had landed hard. It was a miracle anything inside had survived. Her breath hitched. She should have called it in. Tagged the site for retrieval. That's what training dictated: observe, report. Preserve self. She wasn't a medic, not even a soldier anymore. Just a stranded scout whose mission no longer mattered. But she didn't move. The creature shifted slightly, emitting another thin sound. Its limb curled inward, shielding something, perhaps. A wound, perhaps just shame. It wasn't hostile, wasn't armored or armed. It didn't even look like a fighter. The purple blood smeared across its chest looked thick, clotted. The kind of blood that meant you didn't have hours, maybe not even minutes. Kara approached. Slowly, her shadow falling over its crumpled form. The thing flinched and released a weak hiss. It was trying to appear threatening, failing. Something in her stomach twisted. She knelt. The ground was hot beneath her knees. Her cracked visor flickered warnings: radiation spike, toxic exposure, oxygen critical. She ignored it all. Carefully, she lowered her rifle, fingers brushing the side of the alien's broken limb. It twitched, but didn't pull away. She could see the damage now. Bone, if it even had bones, protruded jaggedly from one limb. Its chest cavity was scorched, and one of its sensory stalks had been sheared clean off. But more than its physical injuries, it looked afraid. Not of dying of. Her Kara slowly removed her helmet, letting the poison-laced air sting her raw lungs. Her lips cracked, but she forced out a whisper. It's okay. You're not alone. She didn't know if it could understand. She doubted it, but her voice trembled with something ancient. Something no translation chip needed kindness. It blinked, or something like a blink, and its breathing hitched, as if startled by the softness in her tone. Then it reached out, slowly, a single malformed limb, stretching toward her shaking hand. Thunder rumbled again. Kara didn't look away. Even as the sky split with distant artillery fire, even as her suit screamed warnings she couldn't fix, even as a signal beacon flickered back to life behind her, broadcasting her location to anyone or anything still. Listening she stayed, holding its limb, breathing poison whispering because sometimes the strongest thing a human can do is stay. Asterisk, the silence between them stretched like a thread pulled too tight. Thin and trembling. Kara's hand hovered inches from the alien's reaching limb, her fingers dirty, cut, shaking from more than the cold. It was not fear that held her breath now, it was awe. She had seen dozens of species during her time in interstellar service. Some violent, some cryptic, some so disinterested in humans they might as well have been stone. But this creature, this small, shattered soul, was different. It had reached for her not out of instinct, but trust. Somehow, in her whispered tone and exposed face, it had found something familiar enough to cling to. That was the moment Kara knew. If she left it here, it would die not as a threat, not as a prisoner of war, but as a child dying in the dark. She shifted closer, slowly, letting her knees crunch through the gritty earth. Her palms pressed into the ash, bringing her even with the creature's broken form. The pain in her ribs made her wince, but she didn't stop. "I'm not gonna hurt you," she murmured, her voice rasping as the acidic air gnawed at her throat. She fumbled at her belt for the emergency medkit, a tiny box with barely enough for herself, let alone an alien physiology she didn't understand. But she had to try. The creature watched her hands with wide, milky eyes, no pupils, no irises, just pale orbs that reflected her image in soft silver. It trembled when she tore open the seal on a pressure bandage. Kara hesitated. "Okay," she said, as much to herself as to it. "This might sting, but it'll stop the bleeding." She reached out, and the alien flinched again, but it didn't. "Pull away." She pressed the seal to its chest, and a small gasp escaped its cracked, mandible-lined mouth. Then quiet, its breathing slowed. The purple blood, thick like ink, oozed less now. She didn't know if it was enough, but it was something. She leaned back, coughing hard, her lungs rejecting the air like poison. The visor on her helmet had shattered completely, now useless. The environmental readings flashed red in her periphery, not long before exposure began to truly break her down. But even as her head swam and her skin itched with invisible burn, Kara looked at the creature and felt something fierce awaken in her. She wasn't just helping it because it was injured. She was helping it because in those soft whimpers she heard something human. Not in sound, but in meaning. Pain, fear, desperation, and more than that, hope. "I'm Kara," she said hoarsely. The name felt like a gift, too heavy and too small all at once. She didn't expect a response, but the alien lifted its head slightly, its gills flaring faintly. Then, with a sound almost like a sigh, it opened a compartment on the side of its torso. Kara froze, reaching for her weapon instinctively, but the creature made no move. Inside the cavity, pulsing with a faint blue light, sat a small sphere, glowing softly. The alien grasped it and held it out, its claws trembling. Kara took it. It was warm, almost alive. As her fingers closed around it, images exploded behind. Her eyes flashes of memory not her own. Lush jungles burning. Eggs scattered, giant shadows blotting out the sky. The unmistakable image of human warships breaching the atmosphere in fire. And then panic, running, screams in a language that echoed like flutes over stone. It wasn't a weapon, it was a memory core. The alien had shared with her its story. She gasped, the world spinning, tears streaking down her soot-covered cheeks. "We did this," she whispered. "We're the monsters." The creature didn't reply, but its gaze remained steady. Not accusing, just sad. Kara looked at the bandages pressed against its wounds, and then back at her own hands. She felt filthy. Not because she'd harmed it, but because she carried the blood of those who had. Her boots, her uniform, her training, they all reeked of destruction. Yet here she was, kneeling in the dirt, begging the universe to give her one chance to undo even the smallest part of that damage. She stood, wobbling, and slung the creature gently into her arms. It cried out weakly, but didn't fight. She adjusted its weight, feeling how fragile it had become. The skin beneath her fingers was blister hot and pulsing unevenly. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe," she promised, staggering forward. "I don't care if it kills me." Around them, the earth trembled distant quakes from orbital impacts. Or maybe the deep machinery beneath the planet still groaning in its death throes. She had no coordinates, no comms, and no backup. But in her chest, where despair once lived, something new had kindled, resolve. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. Not because of the alien's weight, but because of what it meant to carry it. It was not just injured, it was a truth. Humanity refused to face. And if no one else would bear it, then Kara would. Not as a soldier, but as a human being in that poisoned, dying world. A lone woman carried an alien child through fire and ash, not with weapons, not with armor, but with compassion so raw it made the stars themselves shudder. The terrain shifted beneath Kara's boots as she trudged forward, every muscle burning with effort, every breath like inhaling glass. The alien child, because she could call it nothing else, now hung limp in her arms, its blood smearing against her chest in sluggish trails, each pulse weaker than the last. Her own suit had begun to fray at the seams, its systems long since overridden or dead. The radiation warnings had ceased, not because they stopped, but because the sensors had given up. She didn't know how far she'd walked. Maybe a mile, maybe 10. The world had blurred into endless gray ruin, still she didn't stop. Each step, her mind returned to the memory flash she'd received from the orb, that unbearable glimpse into a culture crushed. She'd seen families fleeing into coral-like structures, only to be torn apart by impact tremors. She'd seen children, this child torn from nests still glowing with warmth. There had been no soldiers in the vision. No military targets. Just homes, forests, music that vibrated through stone and water. Kara had known war. She'd been trained for combat since the age of 17. But that vision, it hadn't shown war. It had shown slaughter, and yet this creature had not looked at her with hatred. No venom in its eyes. Just pain, curiosity, the unbearable flicker of hope. The landscape opened slightly, revealing the jagged remains of what had once been a maintenance outpost. She recognized the collapsed solar arrays, the twisted antenna mass bent like a snapped bone. A structure leaned sideways into the earth like a dying animal, half buried, but still intact enough to offer shelter. Kara stumbled toward it, heart hammering. Her vision dimmed at the edges, but she found the strength to push forward, navigating through warped metal and brittle wiring until she found a shallow cavity, once a break room, now little more than a steel cocoon. She sank to her knees, setting the alien down on a tattered emergency cot. The frame groaned beneath its weight, but held. For a moment, Kara just knelt there, panting, dizzy, sweat soaking her scalp beneath the helmet collar. The air here was no cleaner, but it was still... It allowed her the illusion of peace. And that was enough for now. The alien stirred, letting out a soft, gurgling noise. Its mandibles twitched. Kara leaned in. She murmured, brushing its uninjured limb gently. "You're okay. We made it." It blinked. Then, with effort, reached for her again. She took its hand without hesitation. For a long while, there was nothing but silence. And in that stillness, something passed between them, not through words. Not through memory or vision, but something older, deeper. The language of shared suffering. Of survival. Kara found herself thinking of her brother, how he'd cried the night their mother didn't come back from the hospital. How she had held him until sunrise and promised he wouldn't be alone. She had been lying then. He was alone now. Their colony had gone dark during the first wave of orbital strikes. Kara never got to say goodbye, but here she was, holding another fragile life, refusing to let it vanish into dust without a fight. She remembered the creature's memory orb and fumbled it from her pocket again. It glowed faintly. This time when she held it, the pulse was slower, calmer. She brought it closer to the alien's chest and its eyes softened. A low hum filled the space, a sound neither mechanical nor vocal. More like a frequency felt beneath. The skin, the cot beneath the creature, began to vibrate ever so slightly. Then Kara realized it was communicating. Singing, maybe, warning. She pressed her palm to her chest and then to the orb. "I don't know your name," she whispered, "but I'll call you Solace, because that's what you've given me." The alien's gaze brightened faintly. Kara wasn't sure if it understood. Maybe names weren't a part of its culture. But she said it again. Solace. The hum changed pitch, softening. She leaned back against the steel wall, letting her eyes drift to the jagged hole in the roof where the dark sky stared back. It felt like the stars were watching. Maybe they always had. She imagined what someone else might say if they found her here, traitor, madwoman, delusional fool. But she didn't care. She wasn't fighting a war anymore. She was doing what war had never taught her. Healing. As she drifted toward sleep, the alien shifted beside her. Its limb curled around her wrists, not in desperation, not in fear, but in trust. Its skin, though blistered and alien, was warm, real, alive. For the first time in weeks, Kara allowed herself to close her eyes. If she died tonight, it wouldn't be as a killer or a survivor. It would be as a human who chose compassion. And in that simple act, she had already changed the universe. Kara awoke with a start, her back aching against cold steel, mouth dry as sand, lungs scratching. For breath. A faint chime echoed inside the ruined shelter, far too rhythmic to be random debris. It wasn't the building falling apart. It was something else, something pulsing, mechanical, alive. She sat up slowly, joints creaking like old wood, and looked over to where Solace lay still on the cot. Its breathing had steadied, the shimmering gloss of pain no longer dancing across its skin, but it wasn't asleep. Its eyes were open, fixed on the corner of the room where the sound came from. Kara followed its gaze. There, Half buried beneath a collapsed shelf of emergency rations and a cracked solar converter, blinked a panel, its lights erratic, weak, but on. She crawled over, fingers scraping aside debris, until she uncovered a control node. It was military issue, human design. A distress relay, half functional. She wiped the dust away, heart fluttering, the screen flickered. Power reserves, minimal. Signal strength, weak. Communications, dormant, but there was a message. She tapped in the manual override, bypassed the ID lockout. The message had been waiting nearly 36 hours. A voice crackled through the static, weak and broken, but unmistakable. This is Commander Halen of the Use Verity. All survivors, be advised, the treaty has failed. I repeat, the treaty is broken. The Zadran fleet has entered orbital range. All non-combat personnel are to evacuate immediately. Combat units hold ground until orbital strike initiates. No mercy protocols apply. Total purge authorized. Kara stared at the screen as if it had just torn her soul open. The Zadran. That's what they called this species. Kara had heard of them, whispered like curses in backwater bunkers and drunken mess halls. Supposedly aggressive, untrustworthy, full of secrets. She had seen their planet classified as probationary for contact, always shadowed by suspicion. But no one had told her there was a treaty, that they had even spoken. That peace had been possible, and now it was. Shattered, she turned toward Solace, who watched her silently. The orb at its side pulsed again, brighter now. She crawled back, picked it up. The moment her fingers closed around it, another vision slammed into her, not memory this time, but information. Coordinates. An underground nexus, deep beneath the crust of the Lhasa 9, a sanctuary. A last archive of a culture wiped clean from the surface. And above it, armed warheads, primed for annihilation. The humans had targeted the site long before any retaliation. This wasn't vengeance. This was extermination. Kara's stomach turned. Her people hadn't responded to an attack. They had launched one. Her knees buckled. The emergency cot creaked as she collapsed beside it, heart hammering. "We're the monsters," she whispered again, barely hearing herself. Solace reached out, its limb trembling, and brushed her hand. Looked at it, tears welling. "Why?" she breathed. "Why show me this? Why trust me?" The orb flickered again, softer this time, and she felt the reply like a whisper in her blood. "Because you stopped. It wasn't much. Just a fragment of thought, but it hit harder than any accusation. It meant you stopped running. You stopped killing. You listened. You held me." Kara pressed her forehead against its arm, grief pouring from her like a broken dam. Not just for Solace. For all of them. For her squad, for her brother, for the colonies reduced to ash. For the lies that had bound her so tightly. She had never once thought to question them. The relay beeped again. Another message. Newer. All forces, orbital strike countdown active. Nexus site will be eradicated in time as 3 hours. Verify coordinates and evacuate blast radius. No exceptions. Kara's fingers clenched. They were going to destroy it. The last memory vault. The core of a dying species. And Solace, the last child of that legacy, would burn with it unless she acted. She stood slowly. Her legs felt like rubber. Her lungs like paper. But she stood. She looked at Solace. "We're going to that nexus," she said. The creature tilted its head, weak but listening. "We're going to get there first," she whispered. "We're going to stop them." She didn't know how. She had no transport, no team, no orders. Just a dying alien, a faint signal, and a fire in her chest that refused to dim. But she had something more powerful than any weapon. She had truth. And if humanity had taught her one thing, it was this: the truth, once known, cannot be silenced. The earth beneath Kara's boots began to shift from lifeless ash to something ancient and groaning. The ground here wasn't just fractured, it was bleeding. Cracks vented faint heat, and the soil, dark with volcanic soot, pulsed softly with blue bioluminescence, like the dying breath of something once sacred. The map Solace had imprinted into her mind guided her through jagged canyons and under the bones of fallen machines, where rusted exosuits lay like corpses with hollow eyes. The air had grown heavier, every step labored, and Kara's skin burned with slow radiation. But she pressed on, cradling Solace in a makeshift sling over her back, their bodies wrapped together in emergency foil to keep the warmth in and the death out. The entrance to the nexus hidden, an ancient mechanism buried beneath a collapsed dome of stone and petrified roots. At first glance, it looked like part of the terrain. But Solace stirred as they approached. its remaining limb twitching toward a groove in the rock that Kara hadn't noticed. With trembling fingers, she brushed away layers of soot and uncovered a still circular, not mechanical but organic, like a massive iris waiting to open. She pressed her hand to it. Nothing happened. Then, Solace whimpered. Kara looked back. It was lifting the memory orb again, but this time it did not offer it. Instead, it pressed the orb into the iris. Light bloomed outward in veins of violet and gold. The stone uncoiled, sighing as it cracked open. Beneath it, a spiral tunnel descended. Into the dark, each step lined with alien vines that whispered and pulsed with warmth. The heat was staggering. Kara coughed, sweat pouring down her face, her vision blurring as her body screamed to stop. But something in her heart screamed louder. The thought of this vault, the last hope of Solace's people, being vaporized by orbital fire made her feel like her ribs would tear from the inside. This was more than rescue. It was salvation for Solace. For herself, they reached the chamber. It was vast. A cavern carved by time and purpose. Towering spires of glass and coral rose from the ground like frozen lightning. Along the walls, orbs like Solace's floated in quiet rows, thousands, maybe millions, each a history, a life, a soul. The center of the chamber pulsed with light. A massive neural tree reaching from floor to ceiling, glowing with memory. Kara staggered toward it, holding Solace tight, but she wasn't alone. Movement, sharp, mechanical. She froze. A silhouette emerged from behind the roots, human-shaped, armored. One of theirs. Drop the asset, the soldier barked, rifle raised. Now, Kara stepped back, shielding Solace with her body. You can't do this. This isn't a target, this is a graveyard. The soldier's voice was distorted by the suit, cold and clinical. You've gone rogue, Reese. Orders are clear. Cleanse all alien intelligence caches. Threat level. Extinction protocol. No, Kara breathed. You don't understand. I do. I've seen the footage. They attacked Colony Theta. They didn't, she snarled. We did. The silence after that was sharp. The soldier shifted. Propaganda, he said uncertainly. Kara stepped forward, every inch of her aching but alive. I saw their memories. I felt them. This place isn't a weapons vault. It's a cradle. They're not soldiers. They're singers, builders, dreamers. He hesitated. Then, step aside. Kara reached into her satchel and pulled out Solace's orb. It glowed brighter now, responding to the proximity of the tree. Touch this, she said. Softly. Just touch it and see. The soldier's grip tightened. You're compromised. Behind her, the tree began to awaken. Its roots shifted, voices whispering through the walls. The entire vault was responding, recognizing Solace, recognizing home. Kara turned, realizing what was happening. Solace's heartbeat had synced with the root system. The child was triggering the final memory download, the last inheritance of a dying species. And above them, doom approached. A tremor passed through the floor. The orbital strike countdown had entered its final phase. Kara spun back to the soldier. If you destroy this place, she said, you don't just erase a people, you erase the only proof that we could have coexisted. You erase the chance to change. He took one step forward. Then another, but something in his posture had shifted. The rifle dipped to fraction. Solace let out a soft chime, one Kara hadn't heard before. Not pain, not fear. Something like joy. Then the tree lit up like a supernova. All the orbs ignited, floating toward the roots, merging with the neural canopy. A beam of energy shot upward, a silent scream of memory and plea. Kara fell to her knees, shielding Solace as light engulfed the chamber, and far above, on a battle cruiser somewhere beyond the cloud sensors, flared red. A signal was being sent, not a weapon, a message. We are still here. Please see us. And now, the choice would belong to the rest of humanity. Asterisk, the vault trembled with light, the air charged with such dense energy that Kara felt it in her bones. The neural tree blazed above them, the tendrils of memory unraveling and weaving into a stream that spiraled through the chamber like a comet's tail. Thousands of orbs drifted from their resting places, shimmering with remembered laughter, grief, rituals, and ancient songs. A civilization lost but not extinguished was speaking now in every shade of light, every pulse of soundless cry. It was not a weapon, it was witness. And it was rising. Above. The countdown ticked into its final minutes. Kara stood with Solace, curled against her chest, the child too weak to speak, but its breathing steady now, synchronized with the vault's heartbeat. The soldier, his armor now humming with interference, lowered his rifle fully, staring into the luminous chaos as if unsure whether he was still awake. This is sacred, he said quietly. Almost to himself, Kara nodded, trembling. Then help me protect it. He turned toward her, the lines of war etched into every seam of his gear, his face unreadable behind the helmet. She could see the war inside him too, reflected in the hesitant way his fingers twitched. He wasn't evil, just obedient. A man who'd followed orders down into hell, only to realize too late he was on the wrong side of history. Then, with a heavy breath, he lifted his arm and tapped the relay on his chest. Command, he said. This is Scout 5. We have a problem. A hiss of static replied. Scout 5, report. Strike in progress. Confirm Vault has no critical AI assets. Proceed with purge. He hesitated. Kara reached out, gripping his shoulder. They'll erase everything, even Solace. He turned away, voice tight. Command, this vault contains conscious memory architecture, not tactical, cultural, civilian. Orders stand, the voice snapped. No differentiation. High Command wants full sterilization. You have 1 minute to evacuate. Kara's heart sank. There would be no appeal. No negotiation. The soldier cursed and looked at her. You need to go. There's nowhere to go, she said. Not in time. He hesitated again. There's a back tunnel. Emergency evac. Route for researchers before the war. I can reroute the energy grid to trigger a tunnel collapse, shield it from the strike. But someone's got to stay and keep the core calibrated. Kara's eyes met his. She knew what he was offering. You? She asked, voice cracking. He didn't answer at first. Then I followed the wrong orders too many times. Kara opened her mouth to argue, but he'd already turned, stepping into the field of light beneath the tree, pressing his gauntlet into the console embedded in the roots. The interface shimmered, accepted his presence, and began shifting energy toward the chamber walls. You'll have about 90 seconds, he said, not looking back. Kara's throat closed. She wanted to say thank you, or I'm sorry, or you're not alone. But there wasn't time for all the words that needed saying. Instead, she turned and ran. The back tunnel was narrow, carved by hand or by something close to it. The ceiling groaned as the shield grid powered up, forcing the walls to ripple with pale blue heat. She clutched Solace tightly, her legs screaming as she pushed through the winding corridor, every moment haunted by the approaching burn of planetary fire. Behind her, she could feel the weight of it like the breath of a monster. A soft voice echoed through the tunnel. The soldier. Scout 5. Final message. The Zadran were never our enemy, but now they remember us. And someone showed them mercy. Then dash static. Then dash silence. Kara burst from the tunnel just as the world above split in two. The sky tore itself apart, flame cascading through the atmosphere like a red storm. The mountain overhead collapsed into a wave of heat. And rock, a pyroclastic cloud chasing her with the roar of dying gods. She dove behind a ridge, wrapped herself around Solace, and screamed into the earth as the shockwave slammed over them. Then, nothing. No sound, no sky, only blackness. She didn't know how long she lay there, minutes or hours. But slowly, the world returned, first as ringing, then as breath. Then, impossibly, as light. She opened her eyes. The vault was gone. The ridge behind her smoldered. But somehow, impossibly, they were alive. Solace stirred in her arms, and above, a new star blinked in the sky, an orbital relay, once silent, now pulsing with the signal the vault had sent, a broadcast. The Zadran were no longer silent, and neither was Earth. Kara sat in the cradle of scorched stone, the sky above her an open wound stitched with fire trails and satellite embers, where once a vault had lived and breathed and dreamed. Now there was only silence, but not the dead kind, not the silence of ash and finality. This quiet carried weight, memory, a silence waiting to be filled with what came next. Solace lay curled in her lap, his skin cooler now, breath shallow but steady. One of his limbs stretched toward the rising smoke, not in fear, but in reverence, as though he knew that what had been lost was not forgotten. All around them, the land was shifting literally and metaphorically. The orbital strike had erased the vault, but not its signal. The light Kara had seen ascending was not just a beacon. It was a message, carried on deep band frequencies, embedding data into every spectrum it touched. She didn't know how far it had reached, whether the other cruisers heard it, whether Earth Command received its shape. But she knew this. It was undeniable. The story of a people who never asked for war. A people who had waited, even in their pain, for someone to see them. To stop, she looked down at Solace and ran a shaking hand across the side of his face. His eyes fluttered open, dim, but clearer than before. He didn't speak, but he didn't Need to. In the weight of his gaze, she felt his thanks and also his grief. A grief too large for one body. A grief that had lived through stars dying and cities crumbling. But beneath that pain was something greater. Faith. Someone heard. It, Kara said softly, to him or to the sky or to the ghost of the soldier who had stayed behind. They had to. Her suit had long since lost all power, reduced to scraps and foam. She had wrapped it around Solace during the heat wave, bearing the full brunt of the ash herself. Her skin blistered where the fire had kissed it. Her lips were cracked, but she had survived. They both had. That meant something not far above. The distant shimmer of another ship glinted a carrier, she guessed. Not one of the purging fleet. Sleeker, silver-lined. She couldn't tell if it belonged to her people or theirs, but it hovered. Watching, waiting, a sound pinch in her makeshift transmitter, weak but real. Unknown signal received. Coordinates. Traced, survivor found. Kara closed her eyes, relief crashing into her like a second wave. Solace stirred again, and this time the memory orb lit up on its own, without touch. A faint hologram flickered above its shapes, symbols, images. One was of Kara, another was of the soldier who had stayed. Another was of the tree, not as it burned, but as it lived with roots unbroken, glowing brighter than any sun. Kara watched the projection in silence. We did something, she whispered. We made it matter. Solace placed a hand over her. Hark, she mirrored the gesture. From the sky. A small dropship descended, its thrusters scattering dust and smoke. Kara didn't move. She was too tired, too hollow, but her grip on Solace never loosened. When the hatch opened and 3 figures stepped out, one human, one Zadran, and one she didn't recognize, Kara finally allowed herself to believe that the world might have changed. That maybe, just maybe, the message had been heard by more. Then more machines and commanders. They approached slowly, no weapons raised, hands open. Kara looked up through bruised eyes and whispered, "He's the last of them." The Zadran representative, tall, with skin like liquid silver, knelt beside her. Their eyes locked with Solace's, and something old and sacred passed between them. Then the figure reached into their robe and pulled out a new orb glowing. Emptied out an invitation. Solace took it. Kara, watching, began to cry, not with sorrow, but with awe. The past had burned, but this was how healing began, with truth and shared grief and open hands. They lifted her and Solace into the dropship. As it rose, Kara watched the smoldering valley grow smaller beneath them. The vault was gone. The war had not ended, but something stronger had been born in its place. Not a weapon, not a victory. Remembrance. And remembrance, when carried in the arms of mercy, was powerful enough to remake worlds.